You're listening to a special edition of We Get Work, recorded live from Workplace Horizons 2025 in New York City, Jackson Lewis's annual labor and employment law conference. Over 500 representatives from 260 companies gathered together to share valuable insights and best practices on workplace law issues impacting their business today. Here's your personal invitation to get the insights from the conference delivered directly to you. We'll see you in 2026. Well, welcome to the We Get Work podcast studio, live from Workplace Horizons 2025. In the studio this afternoon, Mr. Scott Pachaitis, Dan Duff, and Chris Patrick. Chris, I'd like you to share a little bit about what you and your colleagues do here at Jackson Lewis and the type of law that you practice.
Sounds good. So the three of us are all principals in the firm's Affirmative Action Compliance OFCCP Defense Group. We have historically supported federal contractors in their workforce analytics, affirmative action plans, pay equity analyses, things of that sort, bringing some order to the data to inform employment decisions.
So the title of your presentation this afternoon was Workforce Analytics. Do data-driven assessments put you at risk? Can you share a little bit about what you covered in your presentation and what's happening now?
Happy to. Since January of this year, we've seen a lot of changes when it comes to using data, in particular related to equal employment opportunity or EEO analytics. In January 21st, the Executive Order 11246 was revoked. There has been an increased focus on preventing illegal DEI. And employers are really struggling with understanding what can they do, how can they evaluate what their risks might be, what might they still be able to do in terms of diversity-related analytics or advancing those types of initiatives and concerns in their business. And so our section really covers that. We started with a discussion, more background on what has been the use of analytics. We pivoted to talk about what are the risks in this current climate of analyzing EEO-related demographic data. We talked about some benefits of doing so in terms of Title VII compliance, in terms of being able to confirm or certify that you're not violating any anti-discrimination laws. And finally, some mitigation strategies on what might be the right way or the best way to accomplish what you want to accomplish while avoiding what you want to avoid.
Thank you. So Dan, Chris just spoke about the many changes that have taken place over the last several months. So when you got together to plan this presentation, what rose to the top? What kinds of issues were you thinking about? And quite frankly, how can data still be helpful to employers?
Yeah, I mean, it was difficult because the changes are happening so quickly. So when we first met, we talked about things, and then 2 weeks later, things had changed. So I think that was the hardest part. But it's that environment that's making things very difficult for employers, that rapid change. You come home from work, you put on the news, there's another executive order, and the environment changes. The courts have intervened in a few cases involving the executive orders we're talking about, not fully, and there's no current nationwide injunction on the executive order that Chris was referring to revoke 11246 and also created illegal DEI as a term. That's something that employers need to avoid if they have a government contract in particular or they're getting grants. So I think the biggest focus for employers right now is, look, we understand those DEI risks, but what can we still do that we used to do, for example, under 11246? Can we run adverse impact analyses in RIFs? Can we run promotion adverse impact analyses? Can we run compensation analyses? I think that was a big part of the presentation today.
So given the uncertainty, Scott, and how people are feeling, what issues, and Dan touched on this, but what issues do you believe really resonated with the audience today? What were they really concerned about?
Yeah, I think they were really concerned about the government enforcement and potential compliance checks, and to see if companies are using their data in unlawful ways, to see if they're actually basing employment decisions on results of gender and race analyses, which could get them into hot water. So I think that really resonated with the audience. Is what they were really concerned about. Talking a lot about the uses of analyses, how to safely use analyses, and the attorney-client privilege and making sure they're protected, I think are all the themes that really stuck with the crowd today.
Can I add on that? And I think that a portion that resonated was also the teams who were involved in the various aspects of this. Because so much of the HR analytics, the EEO related statistical work has been pushed out of the legal departments historically in terms of DEI dashboards, in terms of recruitment sources, evaluating sort of what did my pipeline look like. But that's when the focus has been on how do I increase representation, right? And do that in a way that's non-discriminatory. But when we're shifting from an HR operations or a talent operations lens into a risk lens, I think that it takes some reimagining who are the stakeholders and who drive projects in ways that I don't think that every business has really thought through in this space.
So how do you advise them in that kind of circumstance?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I start with we need to identify the solution or the problem that we're searching for the solution for, right? If the solution or if the problem we're trying to solve for is mitigating potential liability or reducing classes or reducing claims by identifying EEO barriers proactively in order to comply with the anti-discrimination laws, to do that proactively and be able to ultimately assert or certify should the contract clause make its way into our contracts. That's a different ball of wax, right? That is a risk identification and a risk mitigation focus. So with that lens, this is about getting legal involved, right? This is about making it a legal-driven process and not a business-driven process.
Great. So, Scott, back to you. Just heard from Chris. What would you share then as some of the key takeaways for your attendees for the presentation, but also for our podcast listening audience? What would you tell them?
Okay, a number of things. First, you need to know the laws where you operate. There are several state laws that implicate the ability to collect data, certain data, particularly for applicants and gender and race data. So knowing what laws operate where, what you're allowed to do, where might you have some challenges is important. Second, it's like what Chris and Dan were both saying, it's important to know your purpose. Right? And this really gets to the heart of the attorney-client privilege because the analysis should be for a legal-related purpose, for the purpose of getting legal advice. And if it is, then we have a good, strong argument that it may be protected as long as we keep it confidential. And then finally, what do you do with the results? I think is a key aspect here. That's really what the White House is concerned with. It's if you're doing these analyses, what are you going to do with them? Are you going to use those analyses to go out and make gender and race-based decisions? Because that is unlawful. And so that's why it's important to make sure you have all these things aligned so that you're in compliance with the law, you're protecting it with the attorney-client privilege, and you're not going to do anything that gets you into hot water on the back end.
So Dan, how is Jackson Lewis helping its clients and employers in this really, really difficult time?
Yeah, I think one of the key things, and I think this came out today, was it's really important to understand what your corporate values are and consider that not only the legal risk, but the employer relations risks that is facing most employers right now. An employer could take the position, look, we're going to drop our DEI programs entirely, but if you've been dedicated to DEI for up to, the last 10 years, that's going to send a message to your employees. And what is that going to do to your workforce and to your business, to your publicity that you might get? So I think the most important thing that we said is, we can tell you what the law is. We can help you navigate that. We can keep you up to date because it's difficult to stay up to date.
We've been hearing a lot about the word proactive over the last couple of days, and it sounds like that's a word that can apply here as well. Scott, Dan, Chris, thank you so much for stepping into the studio and getting behind the mic today, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Great. Thank you, Alicia.
Thank you for listening to Jackson Lewis's podcast, We Get Work. Focused solely on workplace issues, it is our job to help employers develop proactive strategies, strong policies, and business-oriented solutions to cultivate a workforce that is engaged and stable. Please tune into our next program, where we will continue to tell you not only what's legal, but what is effective. We Get Work is available to stream and subscribe on your streaming platform of choice, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. For more information on today's topic, our presenters, and other Jackson Lewis resources, visit jacksonlewis.com. As a reminder, this material is provided for informational purposes only. It is not intended to constitute legal advice, nor does it create a client-lawyer relationship between Jackson Lewis and any recipient.